What is going on, guys? I'm back on the mic today from Spectral Sound, and welcome to today's video. And in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I recreated one of the basses that Soltan used in his remix of Creation by 7 Lions. Now this sound was requested a while ago, and specifically this sound that happens about here. Let me show you the actual sound before I show you mine so we can compare. I also have some drums in here just to fill in space because I found that the sound that I made doesn't sound a lot like it until I fill in the drums, and then it sounds like the song is whole, so I can really compare better. So here we go. I'll just give you a listen of a piece of this drop right here. So the sound I'm talking about is that super high one right here. That right there. So I'm going to show you my recreation, and I'm going to take out the original so you can hear them both side by side. Alright, so let's get right into this. First off, I just want to say that the post-processing is very significant in this sound. This is the sound without any of the drums. Here, let me take all of these out. And without any of the post-processing. And this is it with the post-processing. Now the major part, significant part of this post is the vocodex, because that gives it that really weird. I have the bands like super small, and I'm going to get to that later. That's what gives it that kind of like wet gnarly kind of feel. And I'm gonna, actually there's two parts to that. It's not just the vocodex, it's also some amplitude modulation that I'm gonna get to in Serum. So I'm actually gonna turn off vocodex real quick so you can see that all of this stuff is really just compression and EQing and just making the sound brighter and thicker, while vocodex is the one doing the real work there. So here we go, this is without vocodex. Yeah, and there's a big difference, so I'll get to that afterward. For right now, let's just turn off the post so we have just Serum happening right here. Now here is the Serum Patch. I'm just going to go through like I usually do, turn everything off, and then we'll get to all of it individually. We just have to remember that it ends with the reverb. So here we are in the patch, and this is what we have. Nothing. It's just this square wave down 4 octaves. That's all we got. So we have the square wave right here, and we brought it down 4 octaves like I just said, and the FM is at 60% right here, and it is going up with LFO1 5%. LFO1 is the main modulation that does the talking, that does that motion. So you can just, you see where I got it here, you can just copy this sort of rhythm if you want to remake the sound with me. For this LFO right here, I'm going to put this on the master tune. This is going to be the main pitch modulation. And this is going to work with the amplitude modulation. I did the amplitude modulation manually. I thought it would be easier for me to do it this way. So I'll get to that in a sec. So for LFO2, let's just get this out of the way first. I put LFO2 for the source right here, and I went and selected Master Tune in the Global tab. The type, you can keep it at bipolar because it's going to slide up to the original pitch and then slowly glide upward as we go on. So this is on trigger, and we have it at 2 bars, so you can see its motion here. There we go, it just slides up to about there and then stops, so we're all good. Yeah, I just have this up at 16, so just a little bit of movement there. And you'll be able to hear it more once I put in the FM, that I'm FMing from a sine wave right here, so you'll be able to hear it more when I do that. And for LFO3, let me find that. Yeah, I have LFO3 selected right here for the source. I have the amplitude right here under global, that's just the global amplitude. And I brought it down -90. So that's what that's doing, and it's also bipolar. So what this is doing is it's moving the amplitude up and down really, really quick to give this weird kind of gnarly effect, this sort of glitchy effect that it had right there. And I'll show you. Let me put on the FM so you can really hear the difference. Alright, now I'm going to slowly turn this knob down. This is basically a dry wet. When it's right there, there's like no modulation happening right there. It's the equivalent of moving this, but I don't want to move that because then I have to get it exactly to 90 again. This is 100% modulation right here, and this is 0% modulation. So I'm just going to scroll through that and you can hear the effect. Alright, so you can hear it's a super clean, it's, you know, one crisp sound right there. But then it gets a little more like dirty and kind of messed up, more glitchy as we go down here. And that, along with the vocodex, is what creates the weird sounds that Soltan had used in that little part right there. And that's kind of like the main bass. I believe he just turned up the FM for this parts right here. But yeah, that's how I got that sound along with the vocodex. I turned the rate super high up at 164, so it's just going through really, really fast. And I like doing it this way better than actually using amplitude modulation through the oscillators. Because first of all, I knew I was using FM at the start, and I knew I couldn't do a double FM and amplitude modulation. So it was easier for me to do it this way, and it was the only way I could do it. That's how I do this sort of amplitude modulation. So now that that's covered, let me just get back into the main section. For Oscillator B, once we switch that on, we just have a sine wave going here under basic shapes. I'm not affecting anything for the sine wave there. It's just a pure sine wave, and the level is all the way down because we're doing some FM. Alright, the octave is up 1, so that means it is 5 octaves above the original pitch, because this is down 4 and then it's up 1, so there's 5 in between there, giving that super high screechy frequency. I went over the really high pitched FM when I talked about the getter and lumberjack basses that I had a tutorial on a while ago, and I went over how to get that screech, so I just used that here. I knew that was coming. So now this is what we got. Alright, on to the filter. I have a high pass 12, actually it's just a high pass peak filter 12. So for the cutoff of the high pass filter, I have that at 40 Hertz going up 38 with LFO1. And the resonance is at 49%, that's annoying, 50, there we go. 50% going up 39. So we're just doing some classic motion there, modulating the resonance so we don't get any weird muddy frequencies that aren't there. Alright, for the frequency of the peak filter, I have that at 86%, going down -17, just the classic sort of yoy action. I've turned the drive up to 47%, you can turn it up to 50, it's probably be better, okay. So that just gives it a lot more, that just adds a lot more crunch, it's acting as a distortion here, without actually using the disto effect right there, which I'm going to get to later, that is a part of the sound. But that just adds some extra crunch at the beginning. Alright, for the sub oscillator, there is no sub bass in this patch, at least that I made. I have the sub bass with an 808 later. There really, especially if I put a sub bass, it would go through the vocodex and it would sound terrible. So I just cut the sub from the patch. There is no sub in this patch. I have it on a saw wave. I have the level at 0% and going up 75, and I didn't mess with the octave. This isn't acting as a sub, it's acting as another oscillator to just thicken up the sound, to make it a little more rich and add some more harmonic content with that saw wave right there. Okay, on to the effects. The first effect we have is a hyper dimension. You don't have to mess with the hyper right here. I didn't want any of that weird chorus sound. I just wanted the dimension. The size is at 0, and just turn the mix up a little bit, just for a little bit of width. And that'll come out more when we add the compression and distortion. It'll kind of shape the sound a little better. Alright, for the compression, I have it on a multiband compressor. The threshold is at -18.8. And the ratio is normal, the attack and release are normal, and you don't have to put any gain. And the mix is all the way up, and I believe I have all of these bands at 200. Yeah, all of them are at 200. So it's just pounding through the compressor there to really give it a nice rich sound. Now this is what we got. Now some of the lows are being compressed as well, some of the lows just messy stuff from the FM, and we're going to get rid of that later. Now, for the distortion is actually taking out a lot of those low frequencies I was talking about because of this filter right here. Now, this is a very high sound. There is no low frequency. You can cut it off like really high and still have the same sound. So what I used here is a soft clipper. The mix is all the way up. The drive starts at 0% and it modulates up 75. So we're getting a lot of movement there with the main modulation. I put the filter on post. And I did this little EQ action. I changed it up. I believe it's at a low pass to start. And I just brought it up to the high pass there. And I took the frequency at around like a little over 300. That'll be fine. 300 to 400. And you don't have to put much resonance at all. Just like it just starts out super low right there. So you don't get any huge peaks. So just that sort of shape of the filter cuts down all the low frequencies and just leaves the high distorted frequencies And it's not really that distorted anyway. That just adds more power to the sound going through the Vocodex. Because Vocodex can weaken the sound if you don't use it correctly. So I just made sure to have a lot of power in this main patch. Alright, now on to the EQ. I have the gain here at negative 5.7 going up 34. That is for just a peaking EQ. I just added that to the midsection there. The frequency is 716 and the Q factor is at 35%. So we're just modulating that mid frequency back and forth. Let's have a look. And that just adds to the kind of talking motion of the sound, because I didn't want them to hang out too long. There was a lot of mid frequencies. I didn't mind the mid frequencies at the top, but when the modulation started sliding down, they got a little bit ugly. So I just cut those with the modulation right there. And for the other side of the filter, I have a Shelving EQ. I always call it a filter. I guess it's because I use it like a filter so much. I don't know. A lot of producers do that. I've seen that done a lot. So what I have right here is the gain is at 7.6 decibels and the Q factor is at 58. So it's just a super tight kind of EQ there. And the frequency is at 14317, somewhere around there. It doesn't have to be that exact number. It's just a very high end. Because there's a part right here on the EQ where, let me just show you on a normal EQ right here, and I can make it bigger. There we go. There's an area around right here where things get really screechy and piercing. And there's an area around right here where just up above here where it's a lot cleaner of a sound. It's not that piercing and sharp in your ears when you turn it up loudly. So what I'm doing here with that EQ is I'm basically just bumping up that really high end and leaving this screechy part. I'm not boosting that screechy part because I didn't want it to be too piercing. So I'm just making it a little brighter without it being too piercing on your ears. Alright, now let's continue to the patch. I have some reverb on this patch, which is the last effect I have going. It's a plate reverb. The size is at 9% and the pre-delay is at 4 milliseconds, so just super tight stuff. The low cut is at 13% and the high cut is at 48. Let's just change it to 50 like we did last time. There we go. For the damp, I have that at 28% and the width is at 50%. Normally I turn the width all the way up for the plate reverb because it starts out completely mono. It's a really thick reverb that can add really a lot of richness to your sounds. But here, the sound itself isn't super wide if you hear it in the original song. It's pretty tight in the middle, so I just left it at 50%. The mix is at 0%, modulating with envelope 1 going up 11. You don't have to do anything special to envelope 1. It's just the release is up a bit, and that's it, really. So just a little bit of reverb in there without having too much decay after you lifted your hand up. Alright, on to the effects. The majority of these effects can be done in any DAW. Like, except for Vocodex, you gotta buy Vocodex off the image line forms. But once you get that, all the other effects are standard to any digital audio workstation. First thing we have is a wave shaper. This is just adding distortion. Like, you just added a little blip there and brought it up to around there. That's good. Just some really tight distortion to, thicken it out. And to add some extra high harmonics in there before it goes into the Vocodex. Alright, so that's pretty basic. Now on to the Vocodex. First of all, the mix for this is at 50%. So it's not fully mixed, it's just partially the way. Now I'm going to give you all the numbers for these and stuff, and then whoa, that looked weird. And then I'll tell you exactly what they do. We want the wet for this all the way up. We want this knob right here to be around like 65% or so. You see where I have these modulation and carrier, add a bit of noise right here. This is just adding, it's taking the high frequencies and boosting it up by adding a little more noise based on the level of the high frequencies right there. All of these you want to have them on. For the time variables, you want to turn off minimum times. You want the release all the way down and just a little bit of attack there. It's like 2 milliseconds or whatever. And then a little bit of hold. That's just around 1 millisecond or so. So just a little bit of time variables there to make sure it isn't distorting. Now you want this band width, I believe. Or no, maybe this is the band distribution, or at least it's one of those. One of these is the band width, and one of them is the distribution. I forget which one is which. I think this is the band width. So we want this all the way down, and we want the distribution all the way up right there, and we want the order on 2 right here. We just have 2 little knobs right there. This is basically acting similar to a dry wet, however not exactly. I don't know exactly how it works, so I'm not going to explain it in depth because I don't know enough about it. However, it does kind of work as a dry wet about how much the Vocodex does its process. Alright, we want 55 bands as a key number. You want 55 bands in this, otherwise it'll change up, and I'll tell you about that in a sec. You don't want to mess with the pitch bending here or the chorus that you have. And I just added 2 little dips right in this range because some of the frequencies got pretty harsh. Now this is what we got. Now this controls the width of all of the bands of the Vocodex, because basically what it does is it highlights certain bands in the frequency spectrum and it uses those. You can edit the harmonics in each band. Now what this is doing here is basically adding a lot of cuts, like a bunch of dips. And I'll just loop this sound and you can see what happens when I bring this bandwidth all the way up. Now we just get tiny little bands, so only very specific frequencies are being used while the others are being cut out. That's what gets that weird sort of, I don't even know what to call it. It's a kind of a grimy sound, I don't know, that the original track has. It is achieved with this Vocodex right here. So that's what we got going on, and it can be very harsh on the EQ and the dynamics, so that's what all of this is right there. It's just bringing it back. And like I said, it's at 50%. If we turn it on 100%, this is what it would sound like. We didn't want all of it, we just wanted a bit of it, so let's just mix it in 50%. There we go. Alright, now on to some sound goodizer. Many people frown upon the use of sound goodizer. All it is a compressor. Like, it's just a compressor that acts, it's a lot like an OTT. It's like Image Line's OTT. Like, that's what it is. It's linked to Maximus, sound goodizer is, and there's a preset in Maximus that is this first A compressor. There are 4 different presets, and you can control how much this compressor is compressing with this big knob right there. It's a very simple plugin, and I do use it a lot because it works very well to brighten up the sound and make it really rich. So it just boosts a lot of the high end and the low end and gives it a nice thick sound. Now this is what we got. Alright, and now just a little bit of extra compression to make sure we're not peaking. This is just multiband compressor. So all this is doing basic compression stuff. There's no lows, so I just cut these out. And then the mids just, you know, kind of ducked it down a bit so we don't get too high. And the same thing for the highs. And very similar on the master. That's just nothing complicated, just small basic stuff. I did bring up the pre on both the mid and the high a bit so we get a more high definition sound. But that's all that is, just making sure the levels don't go too high. And then finally an EQ. Now this EQ is doing kind of what I did with the EQ in Serum, where I bumped the high end and then just took down a little bit of those really screeching, piercing frequencies right there. So I just a little bit of stuff there, and primarily just a low cut right around, where do I have this low cut? Is that, yeah, it's at 627 hertz. So I'm just rolling it off right there so we don't get any of that muddy, weird stuff at the bottom. Alright, and all together, this is how it sounds like with the original track. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, leave a like below. Tell me what you thought about this in the comments. I have updated my requesting process. The sound design requesting is getting switched around. We're not requesting on YouTube anymore. You have to direct message me on SoundCloud. You can find my SoundCloud link on my page on the little channel art there. It will say my SoundCloud. You can just direct message me. I'll get back to you on that. That'll make things a lot easier because I was having some troubles before. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Peace.